She was sold by her own father because she had vitiligo, but a lone Apache warrior saw beauty where the world only saw flaw and made her his sacred desert flower. Subscribe to the channel and listen to this beautiful story. The sun rose slowly over the village of Dust Devil Creek, painting the dry earth with a golden light that didn't reach the heart of Ilara Vance. She sat in the darkest corner of the cabin, mending a torn skirt for the third time that month. Her hands trembled not from the chill of the early morning, but from the pain she carried like a stone in her chest. The white patches on her face and neck seemed clearer in the morning light. Vitiligo, the doctor from Phoenix had said years ago. Just a lack of pigment in the skin, nothing contagious, nothing dangerous. But to the folks of Dust Devil Creek, those patches were the mark of the devil. Ilara, her father's harsh voice cut through the silence. Get up and fetch some water. She obeyed without lifting her eyes. Jedediah Vance watched her with the same look of disgust he reserved for dead rats in the barn. 22 years old, and no man had asked for her hand. 22 years of shame carrying the family name. The streets of Dust Devil Creek were narrow and dusty. Ilara walked with her head bowed, her hair covering part of her face, the empty bucket in her hands. Women stepped away when she passed. Children pointed and whispered. Men averted their gaze, as if the sight of her could stain their souls. At the town well, Agnes Miller was washing clothes with other women. When she saw Ilara approach, her voice rose like a rooster crowing the dawn. Well, look who decided to show her face. The marked one. The other women chuckled softly, but the sound echoed like whips in Ilara's heart. She filled the bucket in silence, pretending not to listen. My cousin told me they saw you talking to the preacher yesterday, Agnes continued, scrubbing a shirt with unnecessary force. Does even God take pity on a woman like that? Maybe she asked if there's a cure for the curse, another woman said, provoking more laughter. Ilara clutched the bucket handle until her fingers ached. She wanted to scream, wanted to say she had done nothing wrong, that she hadn't chosen to be born this way. But the words died in her throat like flowers in parched earth. I heard her father's been looking for a way to get rid of the burden, Agnes murmured, looking directly at Ilara. Who'd want a flawed woman? Not even the wild Indians. The bucket almost slipped from Ilara's hands. She turned too quickly, and the water spilled onto her feet, forming a small puddle of mud. The women burst into laughter. Ilara ran. She ran through the dusty streets, through the dark alleys, until she reached home, breathless and with tears in her eyes. Jedediah was sitting at the table, counting silver coins. Few coins. Too few. The harvest is bad this year, he said without looking at her. The drought killed almost everything, and we still have you to feed. Each word was a stab. Ilara put the bucket on the floor and went to her corner, but her father's voice stopped her. You'll have to work harder. Sow more. Sell more things at the market. Yes, father, and you'd better stop going out so much. People are talking. Talking about what? Jedediah finally faced her. His eyes were hard as stones. That you're a curse on this family, that as long as you're here, nothing will prosper. The world collapsed on Ilara's shoulders. She had heard whispers, scornful glances, cruel words, but she had never heard the truth so raw from her own father's mouth. I didn't choose to be this way, she whispered. It doesn't matter what you chose. What matters is what you are. That night, Ilara couldn't sleep. She lay on the hard floor, staring at the dark ceiling, feeling every patch on her skin burn like embers. She closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's face, who died when she was just 10. She tried to remember the stories her grandmother told about brave women, about true love, about worlds where beauty came from within. But all those memories seemed like fairy tales now. 3 days later, a man arrived in the village. Ilara was in the yard hanging clothes when she heard the sound of hooves on the street. She peeked through the wet laundry and saw a black horse stopped in front of their cabin. The man riding it was different from anyone she had ever seen. Tall, dark-skinned, with long hair pulled back and scars on his bare chest. His eyes were dark as a moonless night, and there was something in them that made Ilara's heart race. It wasn't exactly fear, It was recognition, as if she was looking at someone who also knew pain. Apache. She knew immediately. The features, the posture, the way he moved. Everything screamed wild, dangerous, free. Jedediah came out of the cabin, and the two men began to talk in low voices. Ilara couldn't hear the words, but she saw the gestures. She saw her father counting on his fingers. She saw the stranger fiddling with a leather pouch. Money. They were talking about money. Ilara's heart pounded when she realized the Apache was watching her. Their eyes met for a second, and she felt a wave of heat rise up her neck. He didn't look away when he saw her patches. He didn't grimace in disgust. He just looked at her as if he was seeing a person, not a curse. "Ilara!" Jedediah shouted. "Come here now!" She approached slowly, her feet heavy as lead. The Apache dismounted and stood beside her father, motionless as a stone statue. "This is my daughter," Jedediah said, his voice trembling slightly. "As I said, she has some skin issues, but she's healthy, knows how to cook, sew, take care of the house." Ilara felt the world spin. Skin issues, as if she were an animal being sold at the market. The Apache studied her in silence. His eyes moved over the patches on her face, her arms, her hands, but there was no cruelty in that gaze. There was something she couldn't identify, curiosity perhaps, or compassion. "Does she agree?" the Apache asked, his voice low and raspy. "She agrees," Jedediah replied quickly. "She knows it's a good opportunity for her." Ilara opened her mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come out. A good opportunity. Being sold like cattle was a good opportunity. The Apache pulled a leather pouch from his waist and handed it to Jedediah. The clinking of silver coins echoed like funeral bells. "Gather your things," Jedediah said to Ilara without looking into her eyes. "You're leaving today." Ilara didn't move. She couldn't move. She was being sold. Her own family was getting rid of her as they would a sick animal. "Father," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Don't call me father," he replied, putting away the coins. "A father protects his children. I'm protecting what's left of my family." The pain that shot through Ilara's chest was so intense that she had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. 22 years of life, 22 years trying to be loved, accepted, seen as human, and all she got was to be sold for a handful of silver. She walked into the cabin like a somnambulist. She packed her few clothes, the rag doll her mother had made, the beaded necklace that was her grandmother's only inheritance. Everything fit into a small cloth bundle. When she came out, the Apache was waiting. He helped her onto the back of his horse without a word. His hands were calloused but gentle, and he was careful not to touch her more than necessary. Jedediah didn't say goodbye. He didn't look back. He simply went into the cabin and closed the door, as if his daughter had never existed. The horse began to walk, and Ilara felt her former life disappear into the dust of the road. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just held onto the Apache's waist and tried to breathe. The journey was silent. They rode for hours through a harsh, empty landscape, climbing rocky trails that snaked between mountains covered in cacti and thorny bushes. The sun was setting when they finally stopped. The Apache dismounted and helped Ilara down. They were in a hidden valley between high rocks, where a small spring formed a crystal-clear stream. There was a simple cabin built against the rock, almost invisible in the landscape. "This is your new home," the Apache said, speaking for the first time since they left the village. Ilara looked around. It was isolated, wild, but there was a strange beauty in that place. The sound of running water was like soft music, and the stars were beginning to appear in the purple sky. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice small. "Arwan. I'm Ilara." He nodded and headed towards the cabin. Ilara followed, still in shock, still trying to understand what had happened to her life. Inside the cabin was the essential: a simple bed, a wooden table, animal skins on the floor, a few pots and plates. It was clean, organized, but empty of anything that would indicate emotional life. Arwan pointed to a corner where there was a mattress on the floor. "You sleep here. There's food on the table, clean water in the well." Ilara nodded, still unable to fully process the reality. She had been sold. She was now living with a stranger, an Apache in the mountains, and she had no idea what he expected of her. Aruan headed for the door, but stopped before leaving. "I won't hurt you," he said without turning around. "You don't need to be afraid." And then he left, leaving Ilara alone with her thoughts and her pain. She sat on the mattress and finally let the tears fall. She cried for the family that rejected her, for the life she lost, for the uncertain future that awaited her. She cried until she had no more tears, until her body ached from sobbing. When she finally managed to stop, the moon was high in the sky. Ilara lay down and pulled a blanket over her body. Through the small window, she could see Aruan sitting outside, motionless as a sentinel, looking out into the night. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she would survive in that solitude. But for the first time in years, no one was looking at her with disgust or pity. And that, for now, was enough. Ilara woke to the sound of wood being chopped. Sunlight streamed through the small window, and for a moment she didn't know where she was. Then reality returned like a punch to the gut. The sail, the Apache, the new life. She got up slowly and peeked out the window. Aruan was outside, shirtless, sweat glistening on his muscular back as he split logs with an axe. His hands moved with precision, each blow accurate and strong. There was a wild dance in those movements, something that spoke of a lifetime lived in nature. Ilara observed the scars on his back, a long mark that ran from his neck to his waist, several other smaller ones scattered across his arms and shoulders. Each told a story of pain, of struggle, of survival. He stopped suddenly and turned, as if he felt he was being watched. His eyes met hers through the window. Ilara quickly drew back, her face burning with shame. When she finally left the cabin, Aruan was wearing a cotton shirt and brewing coffee over a small campfire. He pointed to a log beside the fire. "Sit, eat." There was bread, cheese, and wild berries in a clay bowl. Ilara sat and ate in silence, feeling his eyes on her. It wasn't a predatory gaze. It was more as if he was trying to decipher a riddle. "Why did you buy me?" she asked suddenly, surprising herself with her own courage. Aruan drank his coffee slowly before answering. "Because you needed to be bought." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." Ilara felt frustration rise in her throat. She wanted to understand, wanted to know what he expected of her, what price she would have to pay for being there. "Do you have a wife?" she asked. "No." "Children?" "No." "Family?" Something passed over Aruan's face, a shadow, an old pain. "Not anymore." Silence fell between them like a stone in a well. Ilara finished eating and stood up. "What do you want me to do?" "Whatever you want to do." "I don't understand." Aruan stood up too and began to put out the fire. "You're free to do what you want here. Cook, clean, rest, explore the valley. Just don't go too far from the rocks. There are cougars and coyotes in these mountains." Free. When was the last time anyone had used that word to describe her life? The first few days passed like a strange dream. Ilara cleaned the cabin, organized Aruan's few belongings, cooked simple meals. He would leave in the morning to hunt or gather provisions and return in the late afternoon. They spoke little, but there was a strange peace in that silence. On the fourth night, Ilara was sewing by candlelight when she heard a low groan coming from outside. She got up and opened the door. Aruan was sitting near the campfire, fiddling with something on his left arm. "What happened?" she asked, approaching him. "Nothing. Go back inside." But Ilara saw blood trickling between his fingers. She saw the iron trap with sharp teeth discarded on the ground beside him. "You're hurt," she said, kneeling beside him. "Let me see." "No need." "Let me see," she repeated, with a firmness in her voice that surprised her. Aruan looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he moved his hand away. The cut was deep, going across his forearm. Fresh blood mixed with dry blood. Ilara ran into the cabin and returned with clean cloths, a bowl of water and a bottle of whiskey she had seen on a shelf. "This is going to hurt," she warned, pouring the whiskey over the wound. Aruan didn't make a sound. He didn't even flinch. He just watched her as she carefully cleaned the cut, her small but steady hands working with precision. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. "My grandmother was a healer. She taught me before she died." Ilara wrapped his arm with the clean cloths, making a tight but not too tight bandage. Her hands touched his skin several times during the process, and she noticed that he didn't pull away. He didn't flinch in disgust like other men did when her patches touched them. "Done?" she said, tying the last knot. "Change the dressing tomorrow morning." "Thank you." It was the first time he had said thank you for anything. "Why were you messing with a trap?" Ilara asked, washing her hands in the bowl. "It wasn't for animals. It was for people." "What people?" Aruan threw more wood on the fire. The flames danced higher, illuminating his face with golden shadows. "Mexican soldiers, bounty hunters, men who think they can take whatever they want from the Apache." Ilara felt a chill in her stomach. "They come here, sometimes, looking for slaves, gold, women, always looking for something to steal. And you live here alone? For 3 years. Ooh, what happened to your tribe?" Aruan's face closed like a slamming door. "They died." The way he said it, so simple, so final, made Ilara's heart clench. She knew that tone. It was the same one she used when someone asked about her mother, about why she had no husband, about why she lived like a shadow in her father's house. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. It happens." But Ilara saw the pain in his eyes. She saw the way his hands clenched into fists when he talked about it. Aruan carried ghosts, just like her. They sat in silence, looking at the fire. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who understood each other's pain without needing words. "Why did you really buy me?" Ilara asked again, softer this time. Aruan looked at her for a long moment. "Because I recognized the look." "What look?" "The look of someone who has been rejected by their own blood." The words pierced Ilara like arrows. He had seen, he had understood. He hadn't bought her out of desire or convenience. He had bought her out of compassion. "Have you ever been rejected by your family?" she asked. "No, but I saw my family being rejected by the world. I saw my people being driven from their lands, hunted like animals, killed for existing. It's different, but the pain is the same." Ilara nodded. It was true. The pain of rejection had many faces, but the cut in the heart was always the same. In the following days, something changed between them. Ilara began to sing while cooking, old Navajo songs her grandmother had taught her. Aruan stopped leaving the cabin when she sang. He would sit outside, listening, a strange expression on his face. One afternoon, while Ilara was washing clothes in the stream, she began to tell a story her grandmother always told about two ravens who fell in love. Her voice echoed softly among the rocks, and when she finished, she saw Aruan standing on the bank, listening. "Your grandmother told good stories," he said. "She said stories keep people alive even after they die." "My grandmother said the same thing." Ilara smiled. It was the first true smile she had given since she arrived there. "She told stories about mountain spirits," Aruan continued, "about how they protect those who have lost their families. Do you believe that?" "Now I do." There was something different in his voice, something warmer, softer. Ilara felt her heart race. 2 weeks later, Ilara was preparing dinner when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Many horses. Aruan appeared at the cabin door, his face tense, a knife in his hand. "Get inside. Now," he ordered. "What's happening?" "Trouble." Ilara ran into the cabin. Aruan closed the door and positioned himself at the window, peeking through a crack. "How many are there?" she whispered. 6, maybe 7. The sound of the horses grew louder. Then it stopped. Male voices echoed through the valley, speaking in Spanish. "We know you're in there, Apache," a commanding voice shouted. "We have business to discuss." Aruan cursed under his breath. Ilara approached him. "Who are they?" "Mexican soldiers, and a man I recognize." "What man?" Aruan looked at her with a grim expression. "The man your father was going to sell you to before I showed up." Ilara's blood ran cold. She moved closer to the window and peeked out carefully. 6 men on horseback were stopped at the entrance to the valley. 5 wore dirty Mexican military uniforms. The 6th was a fat, well-dressed man with a neatly trimmed black beard and small, cruel eyes. Silas Thorne. She remembered him from the Dust Devil Creek market, a rich merchant who bought and sold everything, cattle, land, and some said people. "We have a legal agreement," Silas shouted. "The woman belongs to me. I paid for her." "No, you didn't," Aruan murmured. "I paid first." Ilara felt the world spin. So it was true. Aruan had bought her to prevent her from being sold to that horrible man. "You saved me," she whispered. "Not yet," Aruan replied, checking the ammunition in his rifle. "They won't leave easily." The soldiers began to move, circling the cabin. Silas stayed where he was, shouting orders. "Apache, you have an hour to hand over the woman. If you don't, we'll burn this hole down and take her from your bones." Aruan turned to Ilara, his dark eyes intense. "Listen carefully. There's a secret trail behind the cabin. If things get bad, you run down it. It leads to the other side of the mountain. I won't leave you alone. You will, if necessary." "No," Ilara said with a firmness that surprised her. "I won't run again. I'm tired of running." Aruan studied her for a long moment. Then, for the first time since she had known him, he smiled. "Then we'll fight." And Ilara felt something awaken within her. Something that had slept for years. It wasn't fear, it was courage. It was time to stop being invisible. Silence fell over the valley like the calm before the storm. Ilara and Aruan looked at each other, and she saw in his dark eyes a fierce determination that made her heart pound. The fear that had paralyzed her whole life was transforming into something new, powerful, wild. "Apache!" Silas shouted again, his voice echoing among the rocks like the roar of a hungry beast. "You have half an hour now. Don't test my patience." Aruan checked his rifle again, his fingers moving with the precision of someone who had survived 1,000 battles. His muscles were tense, ready for war, but there was something different in his face, a fierce protectiveness that Ilara had never seen before. "There's a Winchester hidden under the bed," he said, without taking his eyes off the window. "Do you know how to shoot?" "My grandmother taught me when I was a child. To hunt rabbits." "Men aren't much different from rabbits when they're scared," Aruan murmured, and for the first time she heard a note of dark humor in his voice. Ilara went to get the weapon. It was heavy, cold, but when she picked it up, she felt something awaken in her hands. It was as if the Winchester was an extension of her soul, a tool to protect everything she had learned to love. When she returned to the window, she saw that one of the soldiers had dismounted and was cautiously approaching the cabin, his gun drawn. "Firing position," Aruan whispered. "If he gets too close, shoot him in the legs first. Always the legs first." "Ilara Vance," Silas suddenly shouted, his voice laced with a venom that made her skin crawl. "I know you're in there. Your father told me all about your special marks." The words hit Ilara like whips on raw flesh. He knew. He knew about the vitiligo. He knew she had been rejected. He knew about every humiliation she had suffered, and he was using it as a weapon. "Do you think this savage cares about you?" Silas continued, each word calculated to cause pain. "He only bought you because you were cheap, a bargain for a man living alone in the mountains, a defective woman for a defective man." Ilara felt the familiar pain try to latch onto her heart like vulture claws. For a moment, the old insecurity returned, like a cold wave crashing against rocks. What if Silas was right? What if Aruan truly didn't care? What if she was just a convenience, temporary companionship for a lonely man? But then she looked at the man beside her. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched into fists when Silas spoke. She saw the anger growing in his eyes like wildfire. It wasn't anger at being threatened. It was pure, primitive anger, because she was being insulted. "Don't listen," Aruan said softly, his voice trembling with contained fury. "He wants to break you with words before fighting with bullets. That's how men like him work. They destroy the soul first." "Why do you care?" Ilara asked, needing to hear the answer, needing the truth in that terrible moment. Aruan turned to her completely. His eyes were intense, urgent, full of a brutal honesty that cut through all her doubts. Because when you tended my wound, it was the first time in 3 years someone touched me without wanting to hurt me. Because when you sing, the pain in my chest stops hurting for the first time since I buried my family. Because when I look at your marks, I see the scars of life, and they remind me that it's possible to survive. And they are beautiful. You are beautiful. The words pierced Ilara like sunbeams breaking through storm clouds. Beautiful. He had called her marks beautiful. Not just tolerated, not just ignored. Beautiful. Maybe she'd prefer to go home, a new voice shouted, and Ilara felt her blood run cold when she recognized the tone. She moved closer to the window and peeked out carefully. 7 men now, 6 Mexican soldiers in road-stained uniforms, and a 7th man who made her heart stop. Jedediah Vance, her father. He had come with the soldiers. "My father," she whispered, her voice breaking like glass. Aruan looked, and his face darkened like a stormy sky. He brought them here. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. It wasn't enough to have been sold. Now her own father had guided her buyers to her. He had become a hunter of his own daughter. "Ilara!" Jedediah shouted, and she could hear the guilt breaking his voice. "Daughter, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Mr. Thorne was... He tricked me. He said he would take good care of you. He said you'd be treated like a lady." Silas let out a laugh that echoed through the valley like a hyena's cackle. "Stupid old fool. Did you really think I'd use a marked woman as a wife? She'll work in my mines until she dies, just like the other defectives I buy, just like the orphaned children, the cripples, the ones no one else wants." The horror of those words hit Ilara like lightning striking the sky. Silas didn't want her as a wife. He wanted her as a slave, to work until death in the dark depths of the mines, along with other broken and discarded souls. "No," Jedediah whispered, and Ilara could hear the horrifying realization dawning on him. "No, I didn't know. Ilara, I swear I didn't know. I'd never do that to you." "Of course you did," Silas said with absolute contempt. "You wanted to get rid of her and make money. Don't give me that pious talk now, old liar. You knew exactly what you were doing." Ilara saw her father collapse. She saw guilt and horror take over his face like a disease. She saw a man realizing he had condemned his own daughter to a fate worse than death. His legs gave out, and he fell to his knees in the dry earth. "But that's not going to happen," Aruan said, his voice low and dangerous like a wolf's growl. "Because she's not going anywhere with you. You and what army are going to stop us, savage?" Silas shouted, confidence returning to his voice. "There are 7 armed men against 2, and one of the 2 is a defective woman who probably has never held a weapon in her life." Aruan smiled. It was a wild, dangerous smile that spoke of past and future deaths. "Her and I. That's enough of an army." Ilara felt something explode in her chest. A strength she never knew she possessed, a courage that had slept for 22 years, waiting for the right moment to awaken. She rose from the window, holding the Winchester firmly. "Ilara, no," Aruan said, reaching out to stop her. "It's time," she replied, her voice firmer than it had ever been in her life. "It's time to stop hiding." Ilara opened the door and stepped out. The midday sun was cruel and relentless, but she didn't flinch. The soldiers pointed their weapons at her immediately, but she didn't stop. She walked to the center of the valley, the Winchester in her hand, her chin held high, each step firm like a declaration of war. "Silas Thorne," she said, her voice echoing among the rocks like the sound of a church bell. "You want to talk to me? Then speak." Silas studied her from head to toe, his small, cruel eyes lingering on the patches of her skin. He smiled like a predator who had finally cornered his prey. "Finally, the marked woman decides to show her face. You're even uglier up close. Even your marks have marks." The soldiers laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. There was something in Ilara's posture that made them hesitate. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like a warrior. "Yes, I have marks," Ilara said, and for the first time in her life, she didn't try to hide her face. She let the sun hit the white patches fully, let everyone see. But do you know the difference between my marks and yours? What difference? Silas asked, still smiling. Mine are on the skin, yours are on the soul, and mine will disappear when I die. Yours will follow you to hell. Silas's smile faltered. Very poetic, very beautiful. Now enough with the theatrics and come with me before I lose my patience and decide to break a few things first. No? The word came out simple, clear, final. One syllable that carried the weight of a lifetime of submission finally being broken. Ilara saw the surprise on the soldiers' faces. She saw the anger growing in Silas's eyes like spreading fire. No? He repeated, his voice rising an octave. You have no choice, you freak. I have the papers. I paid for you. You belong to me. You paid my father, Ilara said, each word weighing like lead. But my father didn't own my soul. No one owns my soul. Not you, not him, not anyone in this world. Your soul? Silas laughed, but it was a hysterical, desperate laugh. A marked woman like you has no soul. You're a mistake of nature, an aberration that should have been drowned at birth. It was then that Aruan walked out of the cabin. He didn't run, he didn't shout. He simply walked until he stood beside Ilara, his rifle ready, his body radiating a deadly calm that made the horses stir. She has more soul than all of you combined, he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. And she's more beautiful than any woman you've ever seen, because her beauty comes from within. Stupid romantic Apache, Silas growled. You're going to die for a defective woman? For this thing? No, Aruan replied, and Ilara felt her heart race with the intensity in his voice. I'm going to die for a brave woman, for a warrior, for someone who is worth more than 1,000 men like you. Ilara felt hot tears stream down her face. But they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of liberation, of recognition, of true love finally being spoken aloud. What nauseating romanticism, Silas spat. Kill them both. I want the woman alive, but if she resists, kill her too. There are other freaks in the world. The soldiers raised their weapons, but hesitated. There was something in the way Ilara and Aruan stood that made them think twice. They didn't look like victims. They looked like hunters. Jedediah suddenly stood up and ran in front of the soldiers. No! He shouted, arms open. I won't let you kill my daughter. I made a terrible mistake, but I won't let this happen. Get out of the way, old man, one of the soldiers ordered. No! I brought you here, and now I'm going to protect her. Silas gestured, and one of the soldiers hit Jedediah's head with the butt of his rifle. The man fell like a sack of rocks, blood trickling from his forehead. Father! Ilara cried, taking a step toward him. He's alive, Aruan said quickly, but if you run to him now, they'll get you. Ilara raised her Winchester and aimed at Silas, rage burning in her veins like acid. I said no, she repeated, her voice trembling with fury. And I'll keep saying no until my last breath. You won't shoot, Silas said, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice now. Women like you don't have courage. You're right, Ilara said, adjusting her aim. Women like me didn't have courage. But I'm not a woman like I was anymore. I am who I chose to become. And she pulled the trigger. The shot echoed through the valley like thunder cracking the sky. The bullet hit the ground squarely between Silas's horse's hooves, making the animal rear violently and nearly throw the man. The horse neighed in panic, spinning in circles. The next one won't miss, Ilara said, reloading the rifle with precise movements her grandmother had taught her. And the third will be in your rotten heart. The soldiers hesitated. They didn't expect resistance. They didn't expect a marked, rejected, sold woman to have the courage to fight, much less to know how to shoot. Shoot her! Silas shouted, trying to control his panicked horse. Shoot now! But before any soldier could react, Aruan had already taken down two with precise shots to the chest. Ilara turned and shot a third, hitting him in the shoulder and making him fall from his horse. The fourth soldier hesitated for a fraction of a second, enough time for Aruan to put a bullet in his leg. The fifth soldier looked at his fallen comrades, at the determination in Ilara's eyes, at Aruan's deadly calm, and threw his weapon to the ground. "I don't want to die for this," he shouted, his hands trembling. "I have a family. I was just following orders." The sixth, younger soldier also dropped his weapon. "Me neither. This isn't worth my life." Silas was furious, desperate, isolated. His men had surrendered or were dead or wounded. His plan had completely crumbled. "Cowards!" he roared, his voice breaking. "There are 6 trained men against 2. How can you surrender?" "Actually," a new voice said from behind him, low and menacing, "there are 6 men against 8. Everyone turned. 6 Apache warriors emerged from the rocks around the valley, silent as shadows, like mountain spirits. They had appeared out of nowhere, completely surrounding Silas's group. Weapons aimed, faces painted for war, eyes hard as stone. Aruan smiled, and it was a smile of genuine joy. "My brothers," he said, "I thought you wouldn't come. When an Apache calls for help, the tribe answers," said the warrior leader, an older man with braided grey hair and battle scars covering his arms. "Even if he has been exiled for 3 years like a ghost." "How did you know?" Aruan asked. "The mountains have eyes. The eagles tell stories. And when they saw Mexican soldiers climbing our sacred mountain, they called us." Silas looked around, calculating his chances. He had none. He was surrounded, outnumbered, and his own men had surrendered. "This isn't over," he snarled, but his voice no longer held its former arrogance. "I have influence. I have friends in the Mexican government. I'll be back with more soldiers, hundreds of them." "No," Ilara said, approaching him with firm steps. "You won't be back." She pulled a folded paper from inside her blouse, carefully protected. "What is that?" Silas asked, a new note of fear in his voice. "A letter I wrote last night," Ilara replied, "to the commander of the garrison in Tucson, telling him about your illegal mines, about the slaves you buy and sell, about the children you abuse and kill, about the gold you hide from the government, about the taxes you don't pay, about the officials you bribe." Silas's face paled like melting wax. "You don't know any of that. You're just an ignorant peasant." "I do know. Because yesterday I remembered where I'd seen you before. You visited our village 5 years ago. You were going to buy my cousin Pete when he was 12. My grandmother stopped you, threatened to tell the authorities, but I heard the whole conversation. She knew what you did. She knew the names of the officials you paid, the places where you hid the gold, everything. And she told me. And now I know too." Ilara turned to the soldier who had surrendered. "You'll take this letter to your commander, and you'll tell him everything you saw here, how your boss came with you to enslave an innocent woman, how he confessed to using slave labor, how he tried to kill innocent people." The soldier nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am, I'll take it. I swear I'll take it." "And you," Ilara said, staring at Silas with eyes that burned like embers, "you're leaving here, now, and you're never coming back, because if you do, I'll be waiting, and next time, I won't miss. I'll aim straight for your black heart." Silas looked at her with pure, venomous hatred, but there was fear too, genuine fear of a woman he had completely underestimated, a woman who had transformed from victim to predator before his very eyes. "This isn't over," he murmured, but the words came out weak, empty. "It is over," Aruan said, positioning himself beside Ilara. "Because now she's not alone. Because now she has a family that protects her. Because now she knows who she is." "And who is she?" Silas asked, still trying to inflict pain with words. "A warrior," Aruan replied. "A healer, a free woman, someone worth more than 1,000 men like you." The Apache warriors escorted Silas and the surviving soldiers out of the valley. The tribe leader stayed behind, watching Aruan and Ilara with wise eyes. "The tribe awaits your return, brother," he said. "Your pain has lasted long enough. It's time to come home." "My life is here now," Aruan replied, looking at Ilara with a tenderness that made her heart race. Then bring her too, a woman who fights like a warrior, who faces enemies without fear, who protects the wounded, is welcome among us. She has the blood of our people in her heart." When they were finally alone, Elara ran to where Jedediah lay. He was waking up, groaning and touching his injured head. "Father," she said, kneeling beside him. "Are you okay?" Jedediah looked at her with eyes full of tears and shame. "Elara, I didn't know. I swear by all the saints I didn't know what he really wanted. I thought you'd be treated like a rich lady. I thought it would be a better life. You knew you were selling me as property. That was enough to be wrong." Jedediah began to cry like a child. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry it hurts my chest. I was desperate, hungry, afraid of losing the land. But that doesn't justify—" "Nothing in the world justifies what I did to you." Elara looked at him for a long moment. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled her life. It no longer defined who she was. "I forgive you," she said finally, "not because you deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve to be free from this anger. Because carrying hatred is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Can I take you back home?" Jedediah asked, trying to stand up. "I'm already home." Jedediah looked at Aruan, who stood a few feet away, giving them privacy for the father-daughter moment. "Does he truly love you?" "He sees me," Elara replied. "He accepts me. He values me. It's more than love. It's recognition. It's respect. It's partnership." "Will he protect you?" "We'll protect each other." Jedediah nodded slowly, understanding that he had lost his daughter forever. But perhaps, for the first time, also understanding that she had gained something far better than he could ever offer. Can I at least know if you'll be happy?" "I already am," Elara replied, and it was true. After Jedediah left, accompanied by one of the Apache warriors to the main road, Elara and Aruan were left alone in the silent valley. The sun was setting, painting the rocks gold and red, creating long shadows that danced on the earth. "You've changed," Aruan said, watching her in the golden light of the sunset. "You have too," Elara replied. "How have I changed?" "You smiled today. You called those men brothers. You accepted help. You talked about going back to the tribe. You stopped living like a ghost and started living like a man again." Aruan approached her. For the first time since they met, there was no hesitation in his movements, no careful distance maintained. "You brought me back to life," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Without touching anything but my wounds, you healed my soul. You taught me it was possible to feel something other than pain. And you taught me that I can be loved without being perfect, that my scars don't make me less worthy of love." "You are perfect," Aruan said, gently touching one of the patches on her face. "Every mark, every scar, every imperfection, perfect for me, perfect as you are." They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains. It wasn't a kiss of desperate passion, but a kiss of recognition, of healing, of two wounded souls finding completeness in each other. A kiss that sealed a silent promise that they would be together against any storm. The following months passed like a golden dream. Elara and Aruan moved to the Apache village, where they were received with honor and joy. The tribe had lost many members over the years, and the arrival of two healed hearts brought new life to the community. Elara discovered she had a natural gift for healing. The knowledge her grandmother had taught, combined with Apache wisdom, made her a respected healer. She cared not only for the wounds of the body, but also for the wounds of the soul. Other women who had suffered rejection came to her, and she taught them that true strength comes from accepting who you are. Aruan became one of the tribe's war leaders, but also a diplomat. His experience with the world of white men and Mexicans, combined with his Apache wisdom, made him a bridge between two worlds. He protected his people from injustice, but also taught that not every battle needs to be fought with blood. When the first cold winds of winter began to blow through the mountains, 6 months after the confrontation in the valley, Elara and Aruan married in an Apache ceremony that lasted 3 days. The entire tribe came for the celebration, and even some neighboring tribes sent representatives. Ilara wore a traditional Apache dress, embroidered with symbols of healing and renewal, made by the women of the tribe as a wedding gift. Her marks were painted with sacred dyes, transformed into symbols of power and beauty. During the ceremony, the tribe's shaman spoke of two wounded eagles who had learned to fly together. He spoke of how scars can become sources of strength, of how true love doesn't heal wounds. It transforms them into wisdom and beauty. The Great Spirit, the shaman said, his voice echoing under the stars, does not give us wounds to destroy us. He gives us wounds to teach us compassion, to make us recognize other wounded ones, to make us healers. Ilara never hid her marks again. She wore them like badges of honor, reminders that she had survived rejection and found acceptance. Children of the tribe ran to her to touch her magic marks, believing they brought good fortune. They had 4 children over the years. The first was born with a small white patch on his forehead, his great-grandmother's mark, the shaman said. A blessing from the ancestors, not a curse. The second daughter had honey-colored eyes, like her mother. The third son was born with his father's courage and his mother's compassion. The fourth daughter came into the world singing, and everyone knew she would be a storyteller. Years later, when Silas Thorne was finally arrested for his illegal activities, Ilara's letter had reached the right hands. He still remembered the marked woman who had dared to point a gun at him. Even in prison, he dreamed of those eyes that had transformed from submissive to predatory before his very eyes. Jedediah Vance tried to visit his daughter once, 2 years after the wedding. He found her in the Apache village, surrounded by children, teaching them to make corn husk dolls. She was radiant, smiling, free. "You're happy," he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm complete," Ilara replied. Can I meet my grandchildren?" Ilara introduced him to the children, who looked at him with curiosity but no fear. Jedediah cried when his oldest grandson, 3 years old, touched his hand and asked if he wanted to hear a story. "Your mother told me about you," the boy said. "She said you were lost, but now you want to be found." Jedediah spent 3 days in the village. On the last day before leaving, he asked Ilara for forgiveness again. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said, "but I need you to know that I see who you've become, and I'm proud. I don't have the right to be, but I am." "Forgiveness isn't about deserving," Ilara replied. "It's about setting free, and I forgave you a long time ago." On cold winter nights, when the wind howled among the rocks and the family gathered around the campfire, Ilara told stories to her children, stories about a woman who was sold for being different, but who found a man who saw beauty where others saw flaw. Stories about how true love doesn't happen despite our wounds, but because of them. "Why did the woman in the story have marks on her skin, Mama?" the youngest daughter would ask. "Because the Great Spirit wanted her to be special," Ilara would reply. "He wanted her to know how it feels to be different, so she could help other different people." "And why was the warrior alone?" "Because sometimes we need to be alone to learn to value the right company." "And were they happy forever?" "They were true forever," Ilara would correct, "which is better than happy, because happiness comes and goes, but truth remains." And when the children slept, Ilara and Aruan stayed awake under the stars, planning the future, talking about their day, simply existing together in the comfortable silence of 2 people who knew each other completely. "Do you have any regrets?" Aruan asked one of those nights. "Only one," Ilara replied. "I wish my grandmother had lived to see who I became." "She sees," Aruan said. "The ancestors always see." "And you? Any regrets?" "I should regret the 3 years I spent alone, but I don't, because that time taught me to value what we have now." Ilara nestled in his arms, feeling his heart beat against her ear. "Do you know what I learned?" she said. "What?" "That true love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who sees your imperfections and finds them beautiful, someone who knows your story and still chooses to stay." "And what else did you learn?" "That no matter who rejects you, no matter who sells you, no matter who calls you defective. What matters is who chooses you, who values you, who loves you exactly as you are. Arwan kissed the top of her head. And when you find that person, Ilara said, smiling in the dark, you discover you were never invisible. You were just waiting for the right eyes to see you. And under the desert star blanket, two souls who had found healing in each other slept in peace, knowing they had discovered the most important truth of all, that true love doesn't happen when two perfect people meet, but when two imperfect people decide to be imperfect together.